I couldn't feel my hands. It wasn't shock in the way people describe it. No sudden numbness, no dramatic collapse, just a slow, creeping absence, like my body had quietly decided to disconnect from me piece by piece. My fingers rested against each other in my lap, but they didn't belong to me anymore. They were props, placed there to complete the image of someone composed, someone present, someone who wasn't unraveling in the last row of white folding chairs. Under the canopy of string lights, everything glowed too warmly, the kind of golden light people chase for photographs, the kind that softens edges and makes moments look more beautiful than they actually are. It painted Park Sora in something close to perfection as she leaned in, her hand steady, her smile effortless, and kissed my stepsister like it was inevitable. Like this had always been the ending. Like there had never been another version of her life where she turned to me instead. Applause rose around me, swelling, bright, sincere. It filled the space, wrapped itself around the ceremony, sealed it into something official and undeniable. I joined in a second too late, my palms meeting with a hollow, distant sound. It echoed strangely in my ears, like I was hearing it from underwater. I kept clapping anyway, because stopping would mean acknowledging that I didn't belong in that moment, and I had spent years learning how to belong exactly where I wasn't wanted. I had arrived late on purpose, timed it carefully even. I knew when the ceremony would start, knew how long it would take for the guests to settle, for attention to narrow toward the aisle, toward the bride, toward the performance of something sacred. Slipping in unnoticed had felt like the only victory I was allowed. No whispers, no pitying looks, no curious glances trying to piece together the story they weren't supposed to know. The last row had been empty, waiting for someone like me. Someone who didn't matter enough to be placed. Someone who could vanish without disrupting anything. I sat down quietly, smoothing my dress out of habit, back straight, chin level. Controlled, always controlled. I chose plum for a reason. It was darker than everything else in the crowd, deeper, deliberate. Not soft, not forgiving. I refused to dissolve into pastels and polite invisibility. If I had to sit there and watch my past be rewritten into someone else's future, I would at least do it without pretending I was comfortable. The officiant's voice drifted over the crowd, warm and practiced, the cadence of someone who had said these same words dozens of times before. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love endures. The word lodged somewhere sharp in my chest. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to ground myself, the metallic taste blooming instantly, real and immediate in a moment that otherwise felt staged. 5 years, that's how long I had been patient. 5 years of waiting for things to stabilize, to settle, to become something we could finally stand on without fear of it collapsing beneath us. 5 years of 12-hour shifts at San Francisco General, of fluorescent lights and the constant hum of machines, of bodies that needed saving and decisions that couldn't wait. I had lived my life in hours and minutes, in emergencies and recoveries, in exhaustion that seeped into my bones so deeply it stopped feeling temporary. And in between all of that, there was Sora with her restless energy, her relentless optimism that bordered on reckless. She believed in ideas the way other people believed in certainty. Each new venture was the one that would change everything. Each failure was just a step closer to success. I admired that about her once. I thought it meant she was brave. I didn't realize at the time that bravery and carelessness can look dangerously similar when you're the one absorbing the consequences. I paid the rent when she couldn't, told myself it was temporary, that it was what partners did. I covered her car payments when she missed them, ignoring the quiet panic in my chest as my own savings thinned. I funded dinners she insisted were necessary. Networking, she called it. At places where the lighting was low and the prices were high, where she charmed investors with easy laughter and bright confidence while I sat quietly, calculating what those meals cost me in hours worked. Later, I would go home alone, too tired to cook, too drained to think, and eat instant ramen at the small table in our studio apartment in the Sunset District, steam rising in soft curls, the only warmth in a space that felt increasingly like something I was maintaining on my own. I kept believing in her. That was the part I held on to the longest. Belief felt like loyalty, like love. I would come home after overnight shifts and find her asleep on the couch, laptop still open, pitch deck scattered around her like evidence of effort. Empty energy drink cans lined the table, the floor, anywhere she had set them down without thinking. She always looked smaller when she slept, softer, like all the sharp edges she carried while awake had been temporarily set aside. I would clean around her quietly, pick up what I could without waking her, then drape a blanket over her shoulders. Sometimes she would stir, murmuring something incoherent, and I would brush her hair back, press a light kiss to her forehead, and whisper that it would work out. I believed that when I said it, it did work out, just not for me. The funding came like a turning point. $5 million. Validation. Proof that she had been right to keep going, to keep risking, to keep pushing forward no matter how unstable things felt. I remember the night she told me. The way her eyes lit up, the way her hands shook just slightly from the adrenaline of it all. I thought that was the moment everything would finally shift into something stable. Something shared. 2 months later, she told me she needed space. She said it carefully, like she had rehearsed it, like she had already moved through the decision, and was now just informing me of it. 1 month after that, she was with Bitna. The invitation arrived weeks later, thick and deliberate, every detail chosen to communicate importance. It sat on my kitchen counter longer than it should have. I stared at it without opening it at first, as if not knowing the contents could delay the reality of it. When I finally did, the absence of my name felt louder than anything printed on the page. Just my address, accurate, impersonal, dismissive. My mother's call came almost immediately, her voice already trembling with emotion that didn't quite feel genuine, not in the way it should have. There was calculation beneath it, a careful arrangement of words designed to lead me somewhere specific. "You have to come," she said. "People will notice if you don't. Not people will worry. Not people will understand. People will talk, then softer, more precise. You're the strong one. Bitna is fragile." I almost laughed at that. The sound rose in my throat and died there before it could escape. Fragile, the word didn't fit. It never had. But it served its purpose. It reframed the situation in a way that made refusal feel selfish. So I said yes, because I always said yes, because it was easier than explaining why I couldn't. Because I had spent years shaping myself into someone who could endure discomfort without making it visible. And now I was here, watching vows that had once belonged to me being spoken as if they were new. Watching promises I had believed in become part of a different story, one that didn't include me anymore. When the ceremony ended, the shift was immediate. Formality dissolved into celebration. People stood, stretched, laughed, moved toward the reception like a tide pulling everything forward. Music drifted in from the tent, something smooth and distant, layered over the sound of glasses clinking and voices rising. I stayed seated just a moment longer, letting the space around me empty. I had done what was expected. I had stayed. I could leave now without anyone stopping me, without anyone asking questions I didn't want to answer. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress again out of habit more than necessity, and walked toward the edge of the venue. Past the bar where drinks were being poured in quick succession, past the photographer capturing curated happiness, past everything that felt like it belonged to a world I had already been removed from. My head stayed down. My steps were steady. 3 steps from the valet, a voice cut through the noise. "Anyan." Everything in me stilled. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. There was something in it. Control, familiarity, certainty. That made it impossible to ignore. I turned. And for the first time since the ceremony began, something shifted. She paused. And the silence between us stretched just long enough to make everything else feel distant. From the reception tent, jazz music drifted into the open air, soft and polished, the kind of sound that belonged to a world where everything was curated to feel effortless. Laughter followed it in waves, bright and careless, rising and falling alongside the delicate clink of glasses. It carried warmth, celebration, the illusion of something whole. Standing there at the edge of it, I felt completely removed, like I had stepped out of one life, and hadn't yet figured out where the next one began. "I'm offering you the same thing," Rayun said, her voice cutting through the distance without raising in volume, grounded and precise. "Freedom, resources. A way out of a life where people take everything you give and then walk away like it meant nothing." There was no drama in the way she said it, no performance. Just truth, laid bare without decoration. I lifted my eyes to her, searching instinctively for what was missing, for the clause that always followed, the expectation that would eventually surface. Nothing in my life had ever come without weight attached to it. Every kindness had required something in return, whether spoken or implied. Every relationship had been built on a quiet exchange I hadn't always realized I was agreeing to. "What do you want from me?" The question came out softer than I intended, but it held. It hung between us, stretching thin with expectation. For a moment, Raeyun didn't answer. Her gaze stayed on mine, steady in a way that felt almost unsettling. Then slowly something in her expression shifted. Not enough to dismantle the control she carried so naturally, but enough to reveal something underneath it. Something quieter, more human, like a glimpse of a version of her that existed before everything hardened into discipline and distance. "Nothing," she said. The word landed heavier than it should have. "You saved me when you didn't have to," she continued, her voice even but no longer entirely distant. "You didn't know who I was, you didn't ask what I'd done. You didn't weigh my worth against anything else. You just decided I deserved to live." Her eyes didn't leave mine. "I'm returning that. That was it. No elaboration. No conditions layered beneath it. Just a statement that refused to bend into something transactional." For a second, I didn't move. My mind tried to catch up, tried to place her words into something familiar, something I could understand within the rules I had learned to live by. But there was no framework for this, no precedent. I reached out anyway, slowly, carefully, like the moment might break if I moved too fast. When my fingers brushed hers, it was brief, barely a second, but it grounded me in a way nothing else had that entire night. Her skin was warm, steady, real, not distant, not imagined. The card she placed in my hand carried an unexpected weight. It wasn't just paper, it felt intentional, solid, like it meant something beyond its size, black, minimal, sharp edges. Shinrayan, a number, nothing else. No title to impress, no company name to validate it, no explanation to guide me, just her name, and a way to reach her. "I'm not asking you to decide tonight," she said, and there was something almost careful in the way she phrased it, like she understood exactly how overwhelming the moment could become if she pushed even a little too hard. "I'm telling you that you're not alone anymore." The words settled somewhere deep, somewhere I hadn't realized had been hollow for longer than I could measure. Not alone. It sounded simple. It sounded small. It didn't feel that way. She stepped back then, slipping her hands into her pockets, her posture relaxing as if she had already said everything that mattered. But her eyes stayed on mine for 1 second longer, steady, certain, making sure the weight of what she had offered didn't slip past me unnoticed. "That's all I came to say." And then she turned. There was no hesitation in it. No lingering. She didn't move toward the reception, toward the light and noise and celebration. She walked in the opposite direction, toward the quiet edge of the venue, toward the parking lot where everything ended instead of began. She didn't look back, not once. I stood there, the card still in my hand, my heartbeat suddenly loud enough to feel in my throat. It pressed upward with every pulse, uneven, unfamiliar, like my body didn't quite know how to process what had just happened. For 5 years, everything in my life had been defined by giving. Time, money, energy, patience. Pieces of myself I had handed over willingly, believing they were building something that would eventually hold me too. They never had. And now, for the first time, someone had offered me something without asking for anything in return. No expectations, no quiet debts, no future obligation waiting to be collected. I didn't know how to hold that. The card felt like possibility, like an opening I hadn't known existed, or like something dangerous, something that could change everything if I let it. I stared at it, at the clean contrast of silver against black, at the simplicity of it. It didn't try to convince me. It didn't need to. Then my mother's voice cut through everything. "Yan, there you are." The sound of it snapped the moment in half. I looked up. She was already walking toward me, her smile bright and practiced, the kind she wore when she needed everything to appear seamless. Bitna was beside her, arm linked through hers, glowing under the lights in a way that felt almost deliberate, like she had stepped fully into a role she had always been meant to play. They were coming for me, closing the distance, pulling me back. I glanced down at the card one more time, then back at them. 10 seconds. That was all I had. Enough time to decide whether I stayed in the life I had been enduring or stepped into something I didn't yet understand. My mother called my name again, louder now, a thin edge of impatience breaking through her tone. The card pressed into my palm, its edges sharp enough to anchor me in the moment. I slipped it into my pocket, and I stayed not because I wanted to. Not because I believed I could stand there for the next several hours, without something inside me collapsing under the weight of it all. I stayed because leaving in that exact moment, turning away just as they reached me, would create a scene, and my family had built itself on the absence of scenes, on the careful maintenance of appearances, on the quiet erasure of anything inconvenient, so I stayed. My mother reached me first, her hand looping through my arm, her grip just tight enough to feel like control rather than comfort. Bitna stood on my other side, radiant and silent, her white Vera Wang gown catching the light in a way that made her look untouchable. We turned together, moving back toward the reception like a unit, like something whole. The music grew louder as we stepped inside, wrapping around us in warm, golden sound. The lights overhead were excessive in the way expensive things often are, designed not just to illuminate but to transform. Every surface softened, every shadow disappeared. Everything looked like it belonged in a photograph. Round tables stretched across the tent, dressed in white linen, arranged with precision. Centerpieces of white roses and eucalyptus sat perfectly in place, untouched, curated. The air carried the faint scent of flowers mixed with expensive perfume and champagne. 200 people, maybe more, most of them strangers. All of them part of a world that had moved forward without me. My mother guided me through it with practiced ease, her voice smooth, her smile unwavering. "This is my daughter Yan. She's a nurse at San Francisco General." That was all she gave them. No history, no truth, no acknowledgement of the 5 years that had existed before this moment. I wasn't a past, I wasn't a story, I was a role. Convenient. I shook hands, returned smiles. Spoke when spoken to, my voice sounded steady, detached enough that it didn't betray anything I was feeling. Years of practice made it effortless. I knew how to exist in spaces that didn't belong to me. I knew how to make people comfortable at my own expense. One of the investors, a man in his 50s with a firm handshake and the kind of confidence that came from never having to question his place in the world, asked me what I thought of the wedding. "It's beautiful," I said. The words came automatically. He smiled, satisfied, like I had confirmed something important. I excused myself as soon as I could, slipping away before another question could follow, before I had to maintain the illusion any longer. The bar was easier, simpler. The bartender handed me a glass of champagne without asking. I took it, wrapping my fingers around the stem, letting the cool surface ground me. I didn't drink it. I just held it, like it gave me something to do, something to anchor myself to. That's when Sora found me. She moved like nothing had changed, like we were still familiar, like there was no fracture, no history, no quiet destruction left behind. "Hey," she said, leaning casually against the bar. She looked exactly like everything she had been chasing, polished, composed, successful. A tailored white jacket draped over her dress, her hair perfectly arranged, every detail controlled. "I'm glad you came." I didn't respond. The silence didn't seem to bother her. It never had. "I know this is a little awkward," she continued, her tone light, almost amused, like she was commenting on something minor, something inconsequential. "But I really appreciate you being mature about it." Mature. The word settled heavily between us. I turned to look at her fully then, not softening anything, not filtering what I saw. This was the woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life around, the woman I had believed would choose me when it mattered. "I came because my mother asked me to," I said quietly. "Don't confuse endurance with approval." For a brief moment, something cracked. Her smile faltered. Just slightly. Just enough to reveal that she hadn't expected that. Then it was gone. "Right," she said, a small laugh following, dismissive, easy. "Of course." She didn't apologize, didn't acknowledge anything beyond the surface. "Well, thanks for being here." And just like that, she turned away, back to the people who mattered now, back to the life she had chosen. She didn't look back. I stood there, the champagne still untouched in my hand, watching her disappear into a crowd that welcomed her without question. And it settled into me then, slowly, undeniably, how easy it had been for her, how completely she had moved on. The band finished their song, the final note lingering just long enough to signal the shift. Conversations softened. Attention began to turn. Somewhere near the front, a microphone was lifted. A voice tested it lightly, and the room, piece by piece, began to quiet. My mother stood at the front of the tent with a champagne flute raised just slightly, her posture elegant, her smile bright and unwavering. The kind of expression that suggested everything in her world had aligned exactly the way it was meant to. She looked like someone stepping into a moment she had been preparing for her entire life. A moment she believed belonged to her, just as much as it did to the bride. "I just want to say a few words," she began, her voice warm and practiced, carrying easily through the soft hush that settled over the room. Something in my chest tightened immediately. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't confusion, it was recognition. I knew what was coming, not the exact words, Not the precise phrasing, but the shape of it. The direction. The quiet, deliberate way she would build a story that made sense to everyone listening, while carefully leaving out everything that didn't fit. I should have left then. The thought came clear and immediate, cutting through the noise, through the music, through the low murmur of voices fading into silence as attention shifted toward her. My body even shifted slightly, weight adjusting as if it might follow through. But I stayed. I stayed the way I always did, rooted in place by something that felt like obligation and looked like habit. I stood near the back, close enough to hear every word, far enough away that no one would think to look at me. Today, my mother continued, her smile softening as she scanned the crowd. I'm so proud. The word echoed in the space between her and the audience, landing exactly where it was meant to. Proud to see my daughters happy. Proud to see Bitna glowing with love. Proud to see this beautiful family coming together. My daughters plural, but her gaze never wavered from Bitna. Not once. It was subtle, the kind of thing most people wouldn't notice unless they were looking for it. But I saw it clearly. I felt it. The way her eyes lingered, the way her tone shifted just slightly when she said Bitna's name, as if the rest was simply structure and Bitna was the point. Bitna has always been my light, she said, her voice lowering, becoming more intimate, more personal. And seeing her find someone who loves her the way Sora does? It's everything I ever wanted for her. Everything. The words settled heavily in my chest. Everything she ever wanted. Applause broke out around me, immediate and warm, filling the tent with approval. I didn't move. My hands stayed still at my sides. For a second, the sound blurred, stretching out into something distant and distorted, like I was hearing it through water. The edges of the moment softened, then sharpened again all at once. I set my champagne glass down on the nearest table, careful, deliberate, as if the act itself required focus. I was done. The realization didn't come with hesitation this time. It didn't wobble or falter. It settled. Final. I turned toward the exit, each step measured, controlled, my body moving with a steadiness I hadn't felt all evening. The noise of the reception continued behind me, voices rising again as the speech ended, conversation picking up as if nothing significant had just happened. To them, nothing had to me. Something had closed. I made it halfway across the tent before Bitna appeared in front of me. She moved quickly, almost urgently, stepping into my path like she had been watching me, waiting for the exact moment I would try to leave. Up close, the glow she carried under the lights looked different, less effortless. There was tension there, a tightness around her mouth, a flicker of something uncertain behind her eyes. Yan, wait. I stopped not because I wanted to. Not because I felt any pull to hear what she had to say. I stopped because pushing past her would have caused a scene. And even now, even at the edge of everything, some part of me still moved carefully around that line. I know this is hard for you, she said, lowering her voice, her gaze flicking briefly to the side, as if checking who might be close enough to overhear. There was caution in her tone. Not empathy caution. But Sora and I are really happy, she continued, the words coming out quickly now, like she needed to get them said before I could interrupt, before I could shift the conversation into something she wasn't prepared to face. Can't you just be happy for us? The question hung there, fragile in a way that felt almost rehearsed. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment, two versions of her overlapped in my mind. The woman standing in front of me now, dressed in white, composed, defensive, and the girl I remembered, the one who used to hide behind me when things got too loud. The one who cried without holding back, who trusted me completely, who once told me I was the only person who understood her. You didn't just take my girlfriend, I said, my voice low, steady, each word deliberate. You took the family I spent my life protecting. The truth of it landed between us, heavy and unavoidable. And you did it while smiling. The flush that spread across her face was immediate, deepening quickly, her composure slipping just enough to reveal something raw underneath. For a fraction of a second, guilt surfaced, clear, undeniable, then it hardened. You always do this, she said, her voice tightening, rising just slightly as defensiveness took over. You always make yourself the victim. The words came out sharper now, edged with frustration, with something that felt like long-held justification finally finding its voice. Sora chose me, Yan. That's not my fault. There it was. The narrative she had built. The version of events that allowed her to stand where she was, without collapsing under the weight of what it meant. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't circle back into the same empty exchange. No explanation that would reach her, no argument that would change what had already been decided. So I stepped around her, not hurried, not hesitant, just done. I walked out of the tent, leaving behind the lights, the music, the carefully constructed warmth of a celebration that had never really included me. The sound followed me for a few steps, fading gradually as I moved farther away, until it became nothing more than a distant echo. The night air hit me like a reset, cool, sharp, honest. I kept walking, across the sand toward the parking lot, each step grounding me, pulling me further away from everything I had just left behind. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The vibration cut through the quiet, sudden, and insistent. I pulled it out, the glow of the screen harsh against the darkness. A message from an unknown number. "You left before dessert. Are you okay?" I stopped, the words settled in slowly, my mind catching up to what my body seemed to already understand. Only one person would have noticed. Only one person would have cared enough to ask. "Rayun," I read the message again, the letters blurring slightly as my focus shifted inward. "You left before dessert. Are you okay?" My hands trembled. Not from the cold, from something deeper, something shifting, something unfamiliar. I typed before I could think too much about it. "I'm fine. Just needed air." The response came almost immediately. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. She was there, present, watching. "How did you get my number?" The reply came fast. "I have resources. Sybil, direct. Unapologetic." Then another message. "Do you want to leave?" I'm still nearby. I stared at the screen, the question sitting there with a weight I hadn't expected. I should have said no. Should have insisted I could handle it on my own. Should have defaulted to the version of myself that didn't accept help, that didn't rely on anyone, that didn't risk being disappointed again. But I was tired. Tired in a way that settled deep into my bones. Tired of carrying everything alone. Tired of pretending I didn't need anything from anyone. My fingers moved. "Yes, please." The reply was instant, 3 minutes. I stood there, my phone still in my hands, my breathing uneven as I tried to steady it. Behind me, the reception continued, the glow of it spilling out into the night, the sound of laughter and music continuing as if nothing had shifted. My mother would be looking for me, Butna too, maybe even Sora, offering concern that sounded convincing enough for everyone else. I didn't care. Headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the darkness. Growing brighter as they approached, a black car pulled into the lot, sleek and quiet, its movement smooth, controlled. It stopped in front of me, the engine humming softly. Rayun sat behind the wheel. Her suit jacket was gone, sleeves rolled to her elbows. The sharp lines of her earlier composure softened just slightly. Her hair was still perfect, but there was something different about her now. Less distant, more real. She didn't get out, didn't ask anything. She simply leaned over and unlocked the passenger door. I opened it and got in. The door closed with a solid, final sound, sealing off the outside world completely. The noise, the light, the expectations. All of it cut away in an instant. Inside, the air was warm, carrying the faint scent of leather and cedar. The seat beneath me was heated, the warmth spreading slowly, grounding me in my body again. I sank into it without thinking. Rayun shifted the car into gear and pulled away. She didn't ask where I wanted to go, didn't ask what I needed. She just drove, smoothly, confidently. Like she understood that silence was the only thing I could handle. The venue disappeared behind us, its lights shrinking until they were nothing more than a faint glow in the distance, then gone entirely. She took the highway north. The city gave way to darkness, to open space, to something quieter. The road curved along the cliffs, the ocean stretching endlessly to our right, black and vast under the night sky. I leaned my forehead against the window, the cool glass pressing lightly against my skin, and closed my eyes. The silence inside the car wasn't empty. It was steady, safe. It was the first time in months, years maybe, that I wasn't bracing for something. After a while, she slowed, turning off onto a narrow road that led to an overlook. She parked the engine, idled briefly, then shut off. The quiet that followed was deeper. Waves crashed below, distant but constant, their rhythm steady against the stillness. I opened my eyes, the view stretched out in front of us. Cliffs, ocean, stars scattered across the sky. No one else, just us. Rayun didn't speak. She didn't need to. She sat there, present, giving me space without leaving. And then I broke. It started small. A tightness in my chest. A tremor I tried to contain, but it grew too quickly. Too much, too long held back. My throat closed. My breath caught, and then the tears came, not quiet, not controlled. They tore through me, raw and overwhelming, my body shaking with each breath, each sob pulling something deeper out of me. I covered my face, but it didn't stop. Nothing did. 5 years of exhaustion, 5 years of giving until there was nothing left, 5 years of believing I wasn't enough. It all surfaced at once, unfiltered, uncontained. I cried until my chest ached, until my throat burned, until there was nothing left to hold back. Through it all, Rayun stayed. She didn't touch me, didn't interrupt, didn't try to fix something that wasn't meant to be fixed in that moment. She just stayed, steady, present. When the tears finally slowed, when the intensity drained out and left something quieter behind, I lowered my hands, staring at them as if they might still be shaking. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered, my voice rough, fragile. Rayun turned to me. "You don't know me," I continued. "You don't owe me anything." She was quiet for a moment, then she spoke. "3 years ago, you fought for me when no one else would." I met her gaze. "You don't remember," she said softly, "but after the surgery, you stayed." Fragments flickered in my mind, incomplete. The operation took 4 hours. Your shift had ended. You could have left. Her voice lowered, softer now. "But you didn't." She paused. "You sat with me. You held my hand while I was afraid I wouldn't wake up." I didn't remember that. But she did. "You told me I mattered," she continued. "You said every life was worth fighting for." The words settled deep. I never forgot. Something in my chest shifted again. She reached out slowly, her hand moving carefully, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. Her thumb brushed against my cheek, wiping away a tear I hadn't noticed. The touch was gentle, deliberate. It lingered just long enough to be felt fully. Then she pulled back, but the warmth stayed. My phone buzzed, the sound cut through the quiet. I pulled it out, the screen lit up, Mom calling. I stared at her name. I could already hear her voice, the disappointment, the control. The way she would pull me back into something I had just stepped away from. I looked at the screen, then at Rayun. She said nothing. She just waited. I declined the call. Then, without giving myself time to hesitate, I opened my contacts, found my mother's name, and blocked the number. My hands were steady. For the first time all night, my breathing evened out. For the first time in years, something inside me felt clear. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of something new, something open, something that felt quietly like the beginning.